Here we go. We're going to go live now.
All right.
Okay. Yes, I think we're live now. So, hi
Perfect.
everybody,
Hello, everyone.
and yes, we are aiming to have these grammar sessions once a month. We figured that was probably the best rhythm for us, and we're going to be talking mostly tonight about the continuous forms of the verb. So what we're doing, what we were doing, what we have been doing, what we will be doing, all of that sort of stuff. So if you've got any questions about any of that, in addition to the questions that we've already received, pop them in the live stream and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah. Time permitting.
Time permitting.
Right. Well, John, a lot of the questions that we have received already seem to be missing an important element. And that has to do with the question starting off, is this grammatically correct?
Right.
But,
Right.
what about the element of semantics?
Yes. I think there is a misunderstanding among students, even quite advanced students. There's this idea that language is like a kind of mathematics. If it's grammatically correct, we can do it. Just like you can always say that 2 and 2 is 4. But
Right.
there are so many things that are grammatically correct that we simply wouldn't say.
Right.
And
right.
there are restrictions from a semantic point of view, from in terms of the way that the words work. Sometimes it's just that it sounds uncomfortable, and it's just too complicated. I mean, you could say he isn't not coming.
Yes,
and then people sort of scratch their things. What are you talking about? He isn't not go. Does that mean he's coming or not? Please, could you just be simple about this? Okay.
Yes.
You can talk about what isn't happening, and you can talk about what isn't not happening, even at a stretch. Okay, that isn't not happening. I remember my daughter, actually, one of the first things she came out with, we said, Alice, so we're going to go to the park. Do you want to go to the park? And she said, well, I didn't say I don't want to go. I didn't say I don't want to go. Okay, two negatives there, but we understood clearly. Alice wants to go to the park. And but if she said, I didn't say I don't want not to go, we'd have got confused because now there are too many knots in there. We can't wrap our heads around it all. And it isn't ungrammatical. It's simply that we just wouldn't say that. And there are other things.
And really, John, that's where we get a lot of jokes.
Go on.
People realizing that, you can say that, but how am I understanding it?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Oh, things like I saw a man with a telescope.
Right.
I mean,
did you see the man?
Who had the telescope? You had the telescope and you saw the man, or the man had the telescope and you saw him with your normal eyes. And language plays all kinds of tricks on us, and language is not straightforward and obvious, and you cannot. A lot of these questions that you get about the passive. I mean, you could technically, yes, I mean that is correct, but we would never say that. So
right. And if a native speaker would never say it,
why are you learning it? Yeah.
It's not something that a language learner should bother about.
Right.
I think, there's nothing wrong with being curious. I'm not trying to quash that idea. Curiosity is wonderful. But you need to take it in steps. And the first thing you should do is learn standard usages that native speakers would say.
Right.
Until you're at about the intermediate level. Really, just focus on those standard sentences. One of the best ways to do that is look at one of your dictionaries that has a lot of example sentences. such as the Oxford Learners Online Dictionary, and one called Lexico.
Oh, right, yeah.
Lexico is amazing. It has maybe 20 example sentences for pretty much every, not just every word, every definition of the word. Look through those example sentences. If your sentence that you are questioning still doesn't seem to be there, then simply ask a native speaker. Would you ever say this?
Right.
Because it isn't math. It just isn't math.
No.
It's language.
And even from a point of view of people writing grammar books, this is a problem, because where does grammar end and this kind of practical consideration begin? Sticking with the continuous form, is there or is there not in English a present perfect continuous passive? We're being watched, Veronica. We've been being watched for a while. We have been being watched. Is it grammatical or is it? The point is that we can justify it in a grammatical sense. And there are some grammar books that would say, well, yes, it exists. It's just that we wouldn't ever, or we would very, very rarely ever use it.
If you use the typical steps to changing an active voice into a passive voice,
it follows all the rules.
You can do it formulaically by using a formula, but the problem is it has native speakers aren't going to say it, and I wonder about some of the reasons why. Do you think, John, it could be because the verb's too heavy? Okay, so
you've got four
have been being watched. You've got four verbs,
two of which are the verb to be. And that sounds clumsy. I mean, you could just say somebody's been watching us.
But the other thing I wonder is just the sound in the ear. Being. I don't think it sounds good.
It doesn't sound good, and even if you don't have all those, that lineup of four kind of verbal verbs, even if you've only got three, for example, one of the great joys in my life has been being a teacher. So instead of a passive there, you've got has been being a teacher. Well, people, that's a little bit more possible. People might say it, but they wouldn't say even that very often, I don't think.
No, I think and the other thing too is, okay, it works grammatically, but it's not very elegant. I can think of many other ways to say that far more elegantly. And this is something that, we pride ourselves on when we're writing or speaking publicly. We want to find what we call an elegant turn of phrase. So instead of, I have been being a teacher, it's like, no, being a teacher is one of my great joys. Well, that sounds so much nicer, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, people are asking questions about it. I'm looking at it here on Google. People are asking questions. Can we say has been being? It has been being used in the UK for a while, and somebody says, I've never come across anybody saying anything like that. Yes, these things are technically possible. It's unusual. It's very unusual for people to actually say something like that. And if we go into Googling, and so we do get a few examples coming up here. In fact, we've got a lot of results coming up here, but I think a lot of those results are going to be, asking the question, is it acceptable to use it? And here somebody's giving a wrong answer because they're saying it's only in a passive sentence. But I've given the example of one of the great things in my life has been being a teacher. So the answer is you're getting a wrong answer here. But if we actually go into Google Ngram and look at the same thing, we look for has been being here, I think we're going to find that, I mean, I'm guessing that there are not going to be very many results. Now we've got has been being coming in here. Now that's not showing us how many results there actually are. We'd have to go in here and see, how many are there. Grammar books are talking about it has been being. Are we getting actual people apart from grammar books where they're talking about it? This house has been being built. Okay, but so people are talking about it. Here's, I think, is somebody actually using it in a science book, I Proteins, Advances in Research and Application. And that's the sort of context that I might expect to find it.
Yeah, and, they have a bad reputation, science books, don't
Yes.
they? I mean,
Yeah.
if you read any academic criticisms, you'll find that the sciences are always being criticized for overusing the passive. They're dry, boring. And that's what the passive does. It creates a long, slow, boring effect after a while. Once it's okay, but yeah.
It's valid. It's not invalid, and you can see why. If you're a biologist or a physicist, or if you're some kind of scientist, you want to use the passive because you want it to be impersonal. You want to say that. I don't know.
And also because microscopes don't do anything; they're objects.
Yes.
So if you some sentences you have to talk about the microscope. You have to talk about the atom.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you can throw in what the scientist is doing now and then, it makes it a little more interesting.
Yeah. Well, but yes, I mean, you specifically need to talk about it in an objective way. So you have to say that sulfur was placed in a test tube and heat was applied. It's part of the scientific process, and Ray's making that kind of comment here. He's saying there's a reason for it, and there is in science, but I think it's to say it has been that this self-extinguishing resin film has been being used only for specific purposes. I mean, what does it add to say has been being used? Why not just say has been used? What does the being really add there?
Nothing.
So you will find a few examples of it here. And I'm not sure how many pages of examples we're going to find, but if we go up to page 10 here, we've still got more pages. So has been being, it ends after 19 pages apparently, or something like that. It ends.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of those results are, as we've seen, grammar books talking about this present perfect continuous passive, and very, very few actual examples of people using it, especially in textbooks. But rather more likely to find it being used in general conversation, which you can find by Googling up, and you might get some examples there. But again, most of the discussion is based on grammatical correctness.
And Ray also says that he thinks perhaps the example might be a poor translation, which I think happens a lot in science as well.
Yeah.
Different nationalities having to publish in English. They're focused on biology. They're not focused on language.
Sure.
So,
and of course, there is this that a lot of the people who are writing these papers may not be native speakers, and in the particular case that we were looking at, what did we get? Has been being, well, I can't find it. Oh yes, this one. Who's it by? I don't know. But Yeah, a method by adding a flame retardant to the adhesive has generally been being employed. Again, you've got this clumsy construction that
And you don't, like you say, I don't think you need the being.
no, has generally been employed, would
Has
be
been
good enough,
applied.
clear enough. Yeah, it
The
doesn't
being
really
adds nothing.
add very much. So we're talking tonight at the interface, or one of the points, in addition to talking about the continuous forms of the verb, one of the points that I want to make quite strongly is, please, there are plenty of things that are grammatically correct, but which we simply don't say. So
right.
Get that clear. And people are saying, is it possible to say this? You think, well, if I scratch my head and think about it for half an hour, I might find a situation which somebody possibly would say that. But
but let's focus on some standard things.
Let's focus a little bit more on what people are likely to say and what people generally say. Okay, so let's move on a bit.
I want to talk a little bit about, just very, very briefly, about a idea of the continuous. Okay, so since most of our questions were about the past continuous, I'm going to stick with that. Okay.
All right.
So the idea here, John, again, we've got our sky. Okay.
Yeah.
Meaning just, there's no time here. It's just
he played football
without reference to other times. So I'm talking about the past, just meaning it's not now. It happened before now.
Yeah.
Okay. And this guy in the middle here
the footballer.
is a footballer, and he played football. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact. You want to know a little more information? Okay, he played football every day. Well, for how long? Oh, for 3 years.
Right.
Okay, that's all that is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a general fact. Now, let's say I want to push my microscope and make a smaller focus of time. Okay.
Mm.
So now I'm going to bring in time zero, as it were.
Okay.
Okay. And we've got a guy here. There he is in the past again. But now I'm going to put a little border around my footballer. This isn't to say that he ever stopped playing football.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to show you the time I'm focused on while speaking. And now I can say something like, he was playing football when.
Okay.
I could use other words instead of when. I could say while. I could say in 1952. There's all kinds of different time things that I could put there. But the focus is he was playing football at this point in time in the past.
Okay.
But does that mean is he still playing football? You know what? We don't care.
That's not the point.
The continuous is not concerned with anything outside of that orange circle. If we want to talk outside of the orange circle, we can do that with other grammatical points. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that's just the sort of introduction.
All right.
Then let's go to slide 5, John, and just look at the 3 standard usages. And I can't express enough what John was saying earlier. These are examples of where it could be used and where it is used quite often, and it doesn't mean that anything else is wrong. Lots and lots of things can be added to this.
Okay.
So quite often we talk about a longish action, so something that has some length. For example, fall, that's too fast. We need something longer than that. Okay, so it can't be fall. So the length here is something like he was reading when So we want to contrast this. Sally came home. Okay? He was in the act of reading. He had been reading for some time before. Presumably, he continues reading. Maybe he looked up and said hello. We don't know. But when she came home, he was in the act of reading. That's one usage. The other one is when we use the word while. And here we've got kind of a balance. Two longish actions happening at the same time. Okay, and we'll talk about something a little bit crazy there in just 2 seconds. We'll go to number 3 first, just to finish it. Then you can use it with some time adverbial. So, what was he doing at 10 o'clock? Why didn't he phone me? Oh, he was reading at 10 o'clock. Sorry, you know how much he loves his reading.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let's go back to number 2 for a minute. So, we've got 2 longish actions. How about eating? He was eating while I was living in France. What do you think of that, John?
Well, the time frames are so completely different, aren't they? It just sounds pretty weird. Because of the completely different time. He was eating is something that would take like a 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, even in France, it wouldn't take more than 3 hours, I don't think. While I was living in France would have to take at least, a few months. It just doesn't make sense, does it? So yes.
So this is where you've got to think about your semantics. The semantics of eat, the semantics of live don't go together that way. They don't have the same time frame, but it's grammatically perfect.
Exactly. Right? Okay. And that's the kind of thing that we really need to get people to understand, that not everything that's grammatically okay is actually possible for us to say or use. There are lots of things that are grammatically okay that we wouldn't say. And if I can just, is it okay to break in here at this point with, he was reading at 10 o'clock. Now, look, we've got this, he was reading when Sally came home, and this is really anticipating a question that will come up in a little while. But just take a look at this. He was reading at 10 o'clock is an adverbial expression of time, giving more detail about reading. Okay? Yes. Suppose I now say, he was reading when he... what would you say, Veronica? He was reading when he got home.
Was sitting on the couch.
Okay.
Oh, when
okay.
he got home. When he got home.
He was reading when he got home. Okay, that's what he did when he got home. He was reading. So notice how this when and this whole clause is completely different from this when and this whole clause. Please, these are different animals. This one is telling us more detail about reading. Okay, it's an advert, just like at 10 o'clock tells us when he was reading. When he got home tells us when he was reading. Okay, this one tells us about what somebody else did.
And that they interrupted the action.
They interrupted the action. Yes. And
down here, there's no interruption.
That's right.
A fact. It's just 10 o'clock or when he got home.
Right. This simply describes the time frame. Both of these describe the time frame within which he was reading. This one describes something happening while he was reading. They're two completely different animals. They're different things. And I think that this came up in we'll see the question in a little while, I think. This came up because of something I said last time. And we just need to clear this up. That we're talking about two completely different things here. It's not the same at all.
No. Well, okay, let's go to our first question then, John.
Okay, let's take our first question.
And the first question is all about while.
Yeah.
And I don't really know where this person got the idea that while restricts the length of time somehow. It can restrict it in the sense that we were talking about just a minute ago with, if I say eating, then while can't be something that's going to be days longer than that. Okay, that restriction applies. But any other idea, no, it doesn't matter how long. I studied math while I was a student. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
There isn't, is there? That's it.
No.
Most of the examples that we were able to think of, really, we couldn't figure out why this idea, where this idea had come from, that there was some sort of restriction.
No.
I think there might be occasionally situations where we would prefer to say when. How about something like this? I was very shy while I was a child. Okay, now there we are seeing some kind of restriction, aren't we?
Yeah. So I would prefer to put when.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And I wonder, does it have anything to do with it? It's not an action. When you were a child is a state as well.
It's a state, yes. So, but you know, I
was very shy while my mother was introducing me to that strange person.
Yes.
No, that doesn't really work much either. I prefer when, although it's
I think it's when you say stative, I think stative is possibly part of the answer, you know, but it's the first situation. It's the fact that I was very shy.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to fit with while. You know, I was. Again, you'd say something like, I was going out with Jenny while I was a student. Now, how about that one? I was going out with Jenny while I was a student. I mean, again, I think I'd be more likely to say when, but
well, I get the sense too from that. Okay. Now, if you do that one again, John, okay, let me just take that if I could and copy it. Okay. And I'm going to say this one with when. Okay. So when you have the while, Jenny while, I assume you're not going out with Jenny anymore. It was just while. It was
something that happened at that time. Yes. Yeah.
And with this one, sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. You could still be. Yeah, you could say we ended up getting married. Yes. Yeah.
So Jenny, when? Maybe you're still going out with Jenny.
Right.
Maybe. But again, here's the important thing. Nobody is going to say either of those sentences in isolation and nothing else.
There's going to be a context.
There's going to be a conversation. We're going to have all kinds of context.
Yeah.
Maybe Jenny is sitting right here while I'm saying that. And I know maybe we're at Jenny and your wedding with Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny would probably say, you know, I was going out with Jenny when I was a student. Oh, and look at you now, you're married.
Right. Yes, while tends to emphasize the temporariness of it, that it happened
Yeah.
at that time, but it's that was then, and it's finished.
That's interesting. Yeah, I might stick with that, John. I like it. While emphasizes a temporariness of it.
Yeah,
That works for me. Now
yeah,
again, listeners, please, we're just doing this on the fly, and if pressed, we could probably find some examples where that doesn't work, of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
Um, but, as native speakers who have considered the language more than most people, um, we think that that's the way it's probably going to turn out to be.
right.
But you're always going to be able to find an example or an exception. But why do you want to? Why do you want exceptions? Until you're at an advanced or proficient level, go with the standard. You don't need to look for exceptions in everything, right? Ray's
Right.
example. Okay, I was very shy while I was growing up. Hmm. And growing up is a temporary thing. We all get to the point where we're finished with that. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
And temporary also, you've got to remember, it's relative to the verb you're using. So when
right.
I say temporary, I don't mean 2 exact clock minutes. What I
Sure.
mean is temporary in relation to the noun. The noun is growing
The
up.
verb, the verb.
Sorry, the verb. The verb is growing up.
Right.
So that is a temporary thing. It doesn't happen forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, yeah. Evolution, while dinosaurs were roaming the earth, we can
Okay,
use
that's like
while, and they were
65
there for a heck of a
million
long
years or
time.
something ago. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So temporary in all of these things, they're always relative to the verb you're talking about.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So if you say, while you were phoning your friend, we'd expect it to be a couple of minutes, but, while you were growing up, we know that that takes years, and while dinosaurs were roaming the earth, we know that went on for millions of years. So
Mm-hmm.
temporary in relation to the context, because in the end, everything's temporary.
Yeah, but that's scientific. Language doesn't go scientific, John.
Sure, but no,
True
I
enough.
think it was
Okay.
a Chinese philosopher, or no, I think it was a Chinese emperor who said to his wise men, "Can you tell me something, a statement that will be applicable to all situations?" And they went away and scratched their heads, and they came back and said, "Even this will pass."
I like it.
Well, anyway,
That's
let's move
perfect.
on.
So I think we've covered this one. I talked to my friend. In that sentence, sleeping only has a 3-hour duration. Yeah, so no, there's no restriction on it.
Well,
Restrictions are semantic restrictions.
yes,
So,
Ray's
you
putting
know,
something in the. He's put something here in the live chat, and he's making the point that
mm, oh, that's
again, I mean,
interesting.
he's again, just as I said, there's something to do with it being stative, and he's supporting that idea. So he's said, can I squeeze this in here? How can I squeeze it in?
No, come to slide 9,
Go to slide. I
and
want
then
I want to put Ray's
Ray,
comment
and come
in
to,
here.
yes, come to Ray's,
Come to slide 9.
post,
Okay, I'll just put it in
and then
here.
you can, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because it's a good point. It's related to
While
what we're
works with an
talking about,
action
but we
verb and
have
with a
no more
stative
room
verb.
on this slide.
Right.
I think while only works if we use an action verb, with a stative verb
Uh,
only when works. Okay. Could be.
But then, we've got things like while I was a student and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
While I was a student,
I think we're still.
was living in France.
I was going out with Jenny while I was a student. We've already talked about that example.
Yeah,
If we said
yeah.
when I was a student, we suspect that maybe they're still, or it's possible that they're still together. Whereas
It's
if we say
possible.
while,
I
it
think,
tends to indicate
while
that.
I don't think Jenny's in the picture anymore.
Yeah, if I say I was going out with Jenny while I was a student, it sort of leaves us with the feeling that probably they're not together now. So I really finding that very difficult to come up with a rule or an explanation. I would like the person who asked this question, what sources you had and what the links are, if you can give any websites where they were saying this about when and while, because it's clearly a complex area, as Ray has said. It's more complex. It's a complex area, and we're trying to think it through here, but we're not really coming up with a very clear rule for when we would say well or while. We just have a sort of feeling that, well, in that context, while I was a child sounds a bit odd.
Yes.
Whereas when we'd normally talk about when I was a child.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what we can do is put our thinking caps on.
Perhaps come back and talk more about this next time. Yeah.
Succinct answer in our next one. So let's move on, John, to the next question, which now I have broken the next question into many parts because it's really long. So
okay. So yes, I just put in a little message saying we'll see if we can come up with some more info on this next time.
Yeah.
I have to really think about this because, frankly, I think a native speaker intuition would tell us when we'd use when or while, but there is clearly no blanket rule that if it's a long time we can't use while. But quite what the parameters are, I think it's very difficult. I did look at some websites and couldn't find anything really very much on this. So as I say,
nothing that you would want to share.
We'll try and come back with something a little bit more definite about this
Concise
next time. But it's clearly a tricky area. There's something complicated going on there. When and while.
Right.
Okay, so question 2 then, the second question that we had.
And this is in parts now, okay? Because it's quite long.
Yeah.
So the first thing is the person asks, when using the past continuous and the past simple, for example, I was playing football when my friend arrived, it seems to always mean that the playing football started before my friend arrived. Firstly, always is a super dangerous word to use when you're talking about language. But in that sentence, yes, I'm going to assume he was playing football. The past continuous contrasted with a simple is that the longer action had already started happening when the shorter action came along and interrupted it.
Yeah.
That's the idea. That's the idea for that part. So come to slide 11, and this is the objection the person had. Apparently, John, we said something in a previous video.
Yeah.
I was reading a book when I was 5 years old. Okay. And he says what he's confused about, or perhaps it's a she, excuse me, is that in the example given, it applies a different thing, which is that the reading started after. No, it doesn't. It doesn't imply that at all.
Well,
I was
no,
reading when I was 5. Maybe you were reading when you were
when you
4.
were 4,
But
yes, it's true. But when I say I was reading a book, it's going to be one particular book. Okay, so rather than I
but
was
I don't
reading
think you
books in
said I was.
general.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay, I was
in
reading
that
a book.
sense, yes, it would be that you were already 5 years old. But it's like I was reading a book yesterday. It's
Mhm.
the point that I made earlier. It's a different when. It's not, I was
Yes.
reading a book when something else happened. I was reading a book
No.
yesterday. I was reading a book last week. I was reading a book when I was a student. I was reading a book when whatever. I should say that that example was on the fly. It's not a
Yeah.
particularly good example of a
Well,
without any further
and
context. It looks a bit odd
without
there, but
without criticizing you too much, John, it does kind of go against what we were saying earlier about I was eating when he was living in France.
yeah.
Um, it just doesn't jive.
Mm,
The time frame is
yeah.
kind of off. But if we just take it as an
Yeah,
adverbial,
you'd
like
need some more context.
yesterday,
So if I could just sort of add a little bit of context, you might find it
right?
somebody saying something like this. They might say, "I remember when I was 5 years old. I was sitting on my mother's knee and reading a book." Okay,
Yeah,
that's the kind of context where somebody might say that they were reading when they were 5 years old. Okay, so yes, taking that kind of sentence without any context. Uh, but the point is that the when I was 5 years old is just like I remember yesterday or I remember last week. Well, I wouldn't have been sitting on my
yeah.
mother's knee yesterday or last week and reading a book, but I might have been doing something else. The
Mm-hmm.
point is that these are not things that are suddenly happening after. Can you go? Can you take us back to that slide where you gave the 3 different usages or
Yeah,
the 3
sure.
typical usages?
Yeah, we're sorry. There we are.
Yeah, this one is not the same as this one. Okay,
Right.
and I think that's really the confusion that got into the student's head that
Mm.
when he got home was somehow that he was reading when he was reading when he got home. Of course, actually thinking about it, he was reading when he got home is ambiguous, isn't it? It could mean 2 things in English. That
Mm-hmm.
he was in the act of reading all the way walking along the street reading a book and that when he got
Or
home he was
sitting
still
on the
reading.
train. You might say that for someone sitting on a train commuting every day.
Yeah,
You know,
he was reading
I
when
was
he got
reading
home.
when I got home.
Yeah,
Meaning the town is home.
well, whatever. I mean, some people do occasionally see people walking down the street reading a book, and maybe he was an
They're
addict,
dangerous.
and
They're dangerous
he
people.
was
Stay away
reading,
from
walking
them.
along reading. And when he got home, he was still reading. But he was reading when he got home, or for most of us, we'd assume that meant that during the time when he was at home in the evening, or he was reading when he finished work, for example. Okay, or he was reading when the television uh, was
Exploded.
yeah. Again, you see, it could be
No, that's going
it's
to go back up
it's
to Sally. That's
it's
going to go back up to
it's
Sally
it's
because of that
ambiguous,
time.
but the point is that I was reading when I was 5 years old is not that I was reading and then suddenly I became 5 years old. It's not this one.
No, it's not the interruption. It's
It's
not that your 5th birthday interrupted your
yeah,
reading.
yeah,
Um, and if we could go back to the slide we were on there,
sure,
John, just
sure.
for a second. Um, So I don't believe it implies that you weren't 4 years old, that you couldn't read when you were four. It has
No,
nothing
no,
to
no.
do with that. Remember again, going back to the footballer, we've got the orange circle around the guy. That's all we're interested that's all we're interested in when we're talking about past continuous. There might be other things happening that are true, but we're not focused on it right now. And another thing, too, that I wanted to say that if you want to make it clear at what age you started reading, then you say it. He started reading at 5 years old. You know,
Right,
if
right.
that's what it is that you want to say, that means that at some time in the 5th year of his life, he learned to read.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And also, I might suggest here the adverb already.
Yes, yeah,
That
yeah.
could help, that could change things around again. He was already reading when he was 5 years old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that means, wow, what a amazing kid.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because already does kind of give you that emphasis, right? But the whole thing is that we just need context around everything, taking these single sentences,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Anyway, this question's not finished. Hang on, John.
oh, okay.
Come to the next one.
Yeah,
Come to
yeah.
slide 12.
Sure.
And so he says, if so, which we've just said no, all right. Why I was reading a book when I was 5 years old means that I did not start studying before I was five. Well,
It doesn't mean that, no. As we've seen, the footballer was playing, and it's not telling us anything about what happened. We don't know how long before and how long afterwards. Just know that that was happening at that time. Doesn't tell us when it began and ended.
So then he continues to ask, I was studying when my friend was playing
when my friend played. I was studying when my friend played football.
Yeah. Does that mean it's a little odd? It's a bit, does that mean the activity? But wait,
we'd be more likely. This again is in a case where we would be more likely to use while than when, isn't it?
Probably.
That's the first thing. I was studying when my friend played football. Yeah.
And they ask if that activity of studying started after my friend played football. Again,
who cares?
We're not sequencing.
Yeah.
We're not sequencing.
It's simply saying that these two things happened or were happening at the same time. It's not saying which one began first. We don't have a verb. We don't have a verb tense or aspect that will tell us that in English.
We could.
We'd have to use extra words. The verb aspect in itself.
Change it completely.
Yeah.
And say, my friend. If the studying starts after the friend is playing football, we say, after my friend had been playing football for some time, I began studying.
Yeah, and it's a completely different communication.
By using a past perfect, you can start sequencing events. You can also sequence events by using words like before and after, or then, or next. But if you don't, and you just use the two past likes you have, although you need to use that while, I'm sure. I was studying while my friend played football. Who knows what started first? Who knows what interrupted what, if indeed one did? We're not focused on that. We're just focused on two events happening at the same time in a little little limited view of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. That's all. Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's enough about that one.
Right. Right.
Perhaps we'll go to slide 15 then. This
Okay.
is about adverbs.
Ah.
Barely, hardly ever, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Can I jump in
Okay.
here a little bit and say, let's
Yeah.
take a look and see, I am really working
You're not,
as
where are you writing? Oh,
sorry,
you're right
I
there.
put it, I'm putting it onto
Right.
a Google exact phrase search here.
Right.
And so, yes, we do get people saying things like, I'm finally back to working 5 days a week. I'm rarely working more than 8 hours in a day. This kind of thing. Or,
Mhm.
as a theoretical physicist, I'm rarely working with Diophantine equations. So,
Oh my goodness.
well, I can assure you that I am even more rarely working with Diophantine equations. I don't even know what they are. But the point is
Yeah.
that people do, and what have we got here? We've got 212 results for people talking about I am rarely working. And
Mm.
I think a lot of them are going to be things like, I found contexts like when something else is happening. So, for example, um, I'm rarely smiling. People would just normally say, I rarely smile.
Yes.
Okay. But if I say, when I look at old photographs of myself, I notice that I am rarely smiling. So when A is going
In
on,
these
B,
photographs.
yes, when I do that, when I look at the photographs, I notice that I'm rarely smiling. So in that context, that's the kind of context in which you might get a continuous with a negative adverb like rarely. But if we just
And I'm
go
gonna
and look at that
I'm gonna
in
go to my orange circle again. That's the idea. I'm rarely smiling in these
that
photographs.
situation,
You've got to put a limit around the thing you're talking
right?
about. You're focused on that moment.
What I thought was interesting, because I did this little search earlier on, is that
Mm,
I am rarely working gets 0 hits in
mm,
Ngram. Now, Ngram is a corpus, a database of published material. And what that
mm-hmm.
suggests is that in speech, occasionally people will say it. We've got 212 results, which is a very small number,
Okay.
really. But
Yeah.
it may occasionally crop up that people will say, what I'm rarely doing. I'm rarely working, or something like that. But when it comes to editing a book and putting it in a book, the editor will say, don't say that. And to say,
Oh,
why
for
not just
sure.
say, I rarely work? Why not just say, I rarely work? Because it, frankly, is going to mean the same thing. So, and if we change it to other verbs, I'm just being experimental now. I'm rarely eating. No engrams to plot. I'm rarely eating. Well, we've got we get a small number of results. Okay. I'm 10 weeks into my pregnancy now, and I'm rarely eating any vegetables. Okay, so
There you go.
you've got the context.
Focused time.
10 weeks into my
Focused
pregnancy.
time.
So there you've got the sort of general time context and what I'm rarely doing within that context. As
Yes,
I'm
and
rarely eating meat suggests that this is something that's happening these days or around this period of time. That
these days.
is
And
something.
I think that's a really good time adverb for students to link with a continuous. It- Put in something like that. Put in these days,
Or
or
I think this. Go
try
on.
to connect the idea that you're looking at a focused area of time. You're not looking at a general fact.
Yeah.
Like you said, I rarely eat vegetables.
Yeah.
Okay, that means at any given moment in my life, you can come along and see that I rarely eat vegetables.
It's a general thing.
I'm rarely eating vegetables these days because I'm trying a new carnivore diet.
Yeah. So you're putting a kind of time frame around
it. If you come and see me
it.
in 2 weeks, my diet's going to be finished and I'll be back eating vegetables.
But the basic point, the basic point is that nobody's using these expressions very much anyway. And if you go into printed texts, nobody's using them. So it's not that it's ungrammatical. It's back to what we said about people can't really find a context for this. They may occasionally come out with something like that in a less formal situation, like in Google in general, in a Twitter or something like that. But they're less likely, as we're seeing, they're pretty much never really going to put it into something that they've put some thought into, like a published book.
Exactly. So that was I'm rarely working, and I'm just going to add to it over here.
Barely.
These days. Okay. But what about the barely? Now that's a completely different word. That's not a time adverb.
Yeah, I don't really know why the person has kind of tied those two together, because it's not the same thing.
No, barely means with little quantity.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm hardly working. I'm only just. I'm barely working these days. I'm only just doing it. I'm hardly doing it. I'm not really doing it.
It doesn't have anything to do with frequency. Rarely has a lot to do with frequency. Barely has to do with quantity. Maybe a better definition would be something more concrete, like there is barely any water in the desert region. Does that make sense?
Right. There's barely any water. That's right. Yeah.
So when we say it to talk about an activity, it means you're not doing that activity very much.
Yeah.
Not that you're not doing it frequently. I don't know if people can separate the two ideas there. Not very much and not frequently are not the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm just typing a few notes in here.
So this is an example of something that's not grammatically wrong, but which we are unlikely to use. Yes, again.
Yeah, so we're back to this thing about not everything that's grammatically correct is actually something that we're going to use. The first condition for using formal language is that it should be grammatically correct. But that is not sufficient in itself to mean, oh, therefore we can use it. You have to say, well, some things are grammatically correct, but they sound very odd, like using too many negatives. He's rarely not coming. Okay, what are you trying to say here? Do you mean he often comes? All right,
yeah.
just say it straightforwardly. Don't complicate it with. There's nothing grammatically wrong with saying he's rarely not coming, or there's nothing grammatically wrong with saying I'm rarely working. It's just that there are very few contexts in which we would want to say such things. So please get it clear that the fact that something is grammatically correct doesn't mean that you're going to find it used very often, and it does mean that it can very often mean that it's only used in very restricted contexts. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is true even of things that are not odd. I mean, like yesterday I saw 36 pink hippopotamuses. Right?
Very nice.
Grammatical,
Okay.
grammatical. But how many times are you going to want to say that? Okay.
Exactly.
There are an
Yeah.
awful lot of things that you wouldn't want to say because, I mean, when are you ever going to want to say such a thing? When is it ever going to happen? All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
When's it
think
gonna crop up?
in the last video I gave the example of he keeps on dying or something like that.
Right. Right.
Grammatically
Wow.
it's okay, but I mean, you're never going to talk about somebody who keeps on dying unless you mean that their voice keeps on fading out over a telephone or something like that. You know, you might use it in that metaphorical kind of way. So
Well, you might, and here's something that I think really might hit home there.
wait a minute.
So
I've got
yeah, you
now.
could say it, but if you do, you're going to be called a poet.
Right.
Who
Yes.
keeps on
Yeah.
trying. You
Yeah.
know, like you can use this metaphorically, and it could be really powerful. But you've got to be in the right situation. You have to have the right audience. And like John said, with the 56 hippopotamuses, when is that situation really going to come up in your life? How about sticking to learning some standard ways of speaking? And when those are really tight and you've got them down well, then you can start experimenting a little bit more with the 56 hippopotamuses and the guy who keeps on dying. Yeah.
So, oh yes, just a minute. I'm typing in an answer to Nia Rendele here.
Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Yeah, that's a good one, Ray. That I believe that's a Noam Chomsky.
Yes, that's Chomsky, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, saying that yeah, it's perfectly grammatical, but it makes zero sense. Okay. It's not correct to use rarely with the continuous to talk about a present activity.
Well,
Well, no, don't be so strict.
this guy's getting confused for the very reason that we're trying to explain that
Yes.
there are very few contexts. You can see that we've just done a search on Ngram and nobody is using these this form of here we go, Google Ngram. Nobody is saying I am rarely eating. Nobody is saying I'm rarely working. Nobody is saying these in a published text. Occasionally people are saying these things in on Twitter or in more informal contexts, occasionally, very occasionally. And to be honest, there are some grammar books which are going to tell you that they have got it wrong in these informal contexts, that these 212 people who've used rarely in that situation, saying I'm rarely working more than 8 hours in a day, are wrong. There are some grammar books that are going to insist that that's wrong. I wouldn't want to insist that it's wrong. I would simply say you're very rarely going to find that kind of situation.
But the thing is, but the person here, Nirendel,
yes,
didn't quite hear what we said. So I'm rarely working more than 8 hours. I'm rarely smiling. Okay, both of those sound odd without
further context.
Context. So if you put it in context, yes, you can say it, but the context also has to be logical. I'm rarely working more than 8 hours these days because the factory has run out of money. The next one, I'm rarely smiling in these photos taken of me on that horrible camping
Right.
vacation where it rained every day. So, yeah, you can say almost anything, but you've got to put it in the correct context. We don't say, I'm rarely smiling, period. You can
Right.
say,
Right.
I'm rarely smiling in these photos, but don't stop. Don't say, I'm rarely smiling, period, and expect the rest of the world to understand what you mean.
Right.
You have to add why, because when you use a continuous, you're focusing on a very small area of time, and you have to tell your listeners what that time is.
Right. Okay, well,
And
look,
that's the
we're
thing. We
kind of running out
add
of time here.
context to,
There was somebody asked a question that I said we'd try and fit in if we had a bit of time. What's the
was
difference? It's an unrelated question,
okay.
not on the continuous. What's the difference between I would have liked to eat sushi, I would like to eat sushi, and I would have liked to have eaten sushi? Firstly,
I would have liked to eat sushi.
okay,
Yeah.
so I've brought up the slide. Can you see that there?
Where are you?
So it means
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. Okay.
we ate. There was no sushi.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
There was no sushi.
I'm sorry about that. It's all in the
Yeah.
past.
So it's in the past and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You didn't eat sushi and it's finished. Right.
Yeah. It didn't happen in the past. Okay. I would like to eat sushi means,
Gee, what a good thing. That might be interesting to try that. Boy, sounds like fun. Maybe not fun. Sounds delicious. Sorry.
this is to do with the future. It could be yeah, I'd like to eat sushi in 1 minute from now. Yes, let's have sushi. Or it could mean sometime in the future. But it means from now on. So this is not about the past.
To Japan to visit you, I would like to eat sushi.
Yeah.
You think you could get some for me?
Something that could happen in the future. Okay.
Right.
It could be in the immediate future that it's right there on the menu. Let's order it. Let's have it. Or it could be in the distant future. But it's not about the past. This one.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the third one, I would have liked to have eaten sushi. Again, I say, what's your feeling, Veronica?
Well, I'm just looking now, comparing number 1 and 3. I'm wondering, is number 1 correct, really?
I would have liked to. Well, I think what I would say here is that it's grammatically correct, but we tend to shift from the perfect form to the past simple with following verbs.
Really?
Well, you say I would have liked to do something.
See, the thing is, when you see it like that.
Sorry, no, I'm saying I said the past simple. That's wrong. To the infinitive. Just the infinitive.
Maybe. But then you've got, think about how this is said phonetically. I'm just going to do this randomly. To eaten. Or if you say it like that, I think I would say.
No, you could say it. Yes,
I would
have
liked to have eaten.
Yeah.
Have eaten. I think perhaps just because you don't hear all of those haves get reduced seriously, and to have becomes to have,
Yeah.
which, you know, to a non-native ear, that doesn't even sound like anything. And then, of course, you've got the crazy verb eat, which is one of the
Let's have a look.
few irregular verbs that begins with a vowel. So
Yeah.
eat gets eaten, to have eaten.
Now,
Right?
we can't use engram, unfortunately, for this because we only get 5 words with... So would have, liked to have is already 5 words, and then the past participle just doesn't fit in. Engram will only give us 5 words to search for. But we do get things like what I would have liked to have done. And I think that it doesn't really mean anything different from what I would have liked to do.
I wonder, yeah. Well, this is another one for next time, I think.
Possibly,
maybe.
yes.
Because I'm thinking now, if we go, I don't know, to an outdoor event and somebody says, "Oh, did you see the magician? Oh, I missed it. I would have liked to see that."
Or I would have liked to have seen that, yeah.
I might say that at the moment, but when we come home, I would, and they said, "Oh, did you see the magician? Oh, I missed it. I would have liked to have seen that." Maybe with some time.
We are seeing both constructions on engram. I'm sure the servant would have liked to do something.
I would have liked.
He would have liked to do something.
Yeah. I wonder.
2 things she would have liked to do. We are seeing that.
Number two is a future. Something we want to do in the future.
Yeah,
Number
So
1 and 3 is something that didn't happen. There might not be really a whole bunch of difference between the two. Number 3 is definitely what you want to write if you're doing an exam. Okay. You want to add that in for those people who have to take those awful state exams, John. Number 3, please use number 3 if you're writing an exam. But you're going to hear number 1 all the time, for sure. 1 and 3 are for the past, but 2 is for the future. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I would have to give some further thought to the grammatical correctness of 1 as against 3. I think they are both in pretty common use, and I'm not sure that there is any
use, but I know that number 3, people who are writing those government exams, they need to write number 3.
Okay.
What they're looking for is a past, a number 3 conditional. Okay, so they're looking for would plus have plus past participle. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second
would have
part
liked.
of the sentence is to have. I would have liked. Yeah, some form of have. To have. Oh, I would have liked. Oh, hang on. Now I'm all confused. The infinitive is throwing me off. To have eaten.
And now Ray's putting in the chat that he feels he's to mean something slightly different. And I kind of was thinking that a bit.
Okay.
But I'm stumped.
To have eaten, it's no longer possible. Definitely, because it's tied in with the third conditional. It's finished.
Yeah.
You can't do it anymore. That's why I was saying, John, if we go to the outdoor carnival, okay, and we're still at the outdoor carnival,
right?
You say to me, "Did you see the magician?" Oh, I would have liked to seen that. I would have liked to see that. Whereas
Okay.
we come home, the carnival's finished, they've moved off to a different country even, and you say, "Did you see the magician?" Now it's impossible, so I say, no, I didn't, but I would have liked to have seen that.
Okay, so if we're talking about the sushi example, I would have liked to eat sushi. There's still some chance that I might get to eat sushi. I would have. So I went to. I'm in Japan. You know, we today on the menu that we chose this, and I would have liked to eat sushi. So maybe next time when we come here, we'll have sushi. I would have liked to have eaten sushi.
It's no longer possible.
It's all in the past and no longer possible. So yes, there's a slight difference in meaning, isn't there? Yeah.
All the sushi chefs in the world have died.
Or I went to Japan. I went to Japan and I didn't eat sushi. I would have liked to have eaten sushi while I was in Japan, but I'm not in Japan anymore. I've gone back to wherever it was that I came from, and the opportunity is no longer there. But
exactly.
I would have liked to eat sushi has some implication that maybe next time I will. Whereas I would have. So I think yes.
Perhaps I didn't order it, and I'm sort of looking at your plate.
I'm thinking,
oh, I would have liked to eat sushi,
to have some,
hoping that you're going to give me some.
Could even be that, yeah. So there's some chance that it might happen, but I would have liked to have eaten sushi really puts it in the past and implies that it's not possible any longer.
That's it.
Yeah, so I think that we've nailed that one, and
I think
we've overstayed our time here by quite some.
We have. Yeah. So I think we'll close for now and
we'll say goodbye to everybody. Yeah.
See you in a month, and special thanks once again to Ray Lewis. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, I think we might want you to join us up here at some stage because your insights are very helpful.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Bye bye, everybody, and we'll see you again next month.
Bye bye.
Oh, I have to stop. Okay, this is the thing. End the live stream. That's it. We're offline.
We're done now?
We're done.